Alright, screw it. I'm going live right now. Hello. Hello and welcome to Girl by Moonlight in a Maze of Dreams, being developed by me today. I'm really tired today. So, just as a primer, I'm fucking exhausted. Super tired. I've been getting real bad sleep. So what better time than to work on the one that's about going into people's dreams and shit. I've been making some notes on my own time while hanging out with my friend Emily this afternoon. I made some notes about my game while she drew lines and cubes because she's practicing drawing and is doing the very mechanical kind of focus stuff right now. So the two of us hung out in her living room and worked on our respective projects. It was very nice. And I had some thoughts and notions for this, and I was just trying to collect my thoughts and zero in on what exactly I want this to be about and stuff. So hopefully I've got a clearer sense of that, and I can go ahead and actually start putting some pieces together. So last time on Girl by Moonlight, or previously on Girl by Moonlight, I suppose would be the language, we were talking about... So eventually the nature of the conspiracy is going to be a list, like so many that have come before it. But for now I'm just keeping some open questions about what is this playbook? What is this series about? What populations does the conspiracy target? What is the method of infection? Because there's this idea of the conspiracy being like an ideological virus. And so, yeah, what populations does it target? What is the method of infection? And then just a general note for this series playbook, right? The dreaming as a very personal space, with the mundane world being this really impersonal space. And what that is driving at is that we're going into people's dreams, which is to say their inner world. And so we want that to be all about that person, whoever's dream that we're in, and to a certain extent interplay between their identity and the world at large. Right, because the world is our context. Anytime that we dream, we don't just make stuff up. We dream about ourselves as we perceive ourselves and the world as we understand it. Right, so the dreaming as mirror onto the world, but a funhouse mirror, which I think is a great little... Right, it doesn't give us a true reflection. It gives us this distorted, twisted thing, and that's what we're going to be kind of journeying into. And so, rounding back, we have the conspiracy as ideological... Ideological. I'll just put all the letters in. That makes it more correct, right? So, given that our conspiracy is actually a virus, what is this virus's impulse? And so our options here are to control people's dreams, to drive people to self-destruction, to hide one person's shame, to isolate us inside our own minds, to make us shed our bodies, to shatter the barrier between the waking and dreaming, to instill an alien morality in us, or to turn reality to farce. And this one, someone emailed me in a suggestion. It was kind of like this. I'm still trying to figure out the language for it, but it's to make like a cruel mockery of everything that is real. But like to reduce the world to a cruel mockery of itself. So for now, we have turn reality to farce. And then this virus has a host, so like a patient zero. We can have a lone messianic figure, a secret society, artists and luminaries, a cabal of sorcerers, an online gestalt, a mind born in data, an artificial person, a sentient dream. We might add a few more of these. I'm not sure this is the complete list, but the emphasis is on making it all of this, everything in this playbook just wants to be super strange. I want people to drift very far into some kind of strange space that has its own logic. I don't want this one to be very grounded exactly. I want it to get super weird. And like, in my experience of playing in this kind of framework, with like choosing from lists and creating your own setting, that's like you're basically building like an in-joke within this community of like 4 or 5 people, that there's immense potential for that to like, it's going in a certain direction, and as you're playing, it just like keeps going, and it veers further and further and further away. And I want to propel people more aggressively away in this one. So I want the prompts to be really strange, to not push people into like specific things. And I mean both specific things in terms of like me having clear things in mind of what I'm pushing them towards, but also that like the answers for these, or the descriptions of them, or their natures, will be kind of unspecific and like difficult to pin down conceptually, so that there is lots of room for them to get super fucking weird as you try to like contain this really strange idea within your fiction. So we've got our hosts, who are all a bunch of weird things, or which are all a bunch of weird things. And then the vector of infection. So this is like how this host is delivering its payload of ideological virus. And we have subliminal messaging, insular communities and coded language, hopes and desires, passions and conflict, fashion and ritual, ingesting a fragment of dream, consumption and excess. A lot of them are... Some of them are like very specific, like subliminal messaging, or this idea of like ingesting a fragment of dream. These are like very clear notions of how you might contract it, and then others are a little bit stranger, like that the vector of infection is through your like inclusion in a community, or through hearing coded language. Hopes and desires, like how does it use hope as a way to infect people? A little more open, but these need to be kind of functional elements, so I think it's okay for them to dip down into a bit more specificity. And where I left off last time was with this prompt for the mundane world, because there's a challenge that lies in, I think I was talking about this last time, the challenge with the mundane world is that we want to, my goal is to create, as I stated up here at the top of the page, the mundane world belongs to everyone and no one. This idea of like a very kind of collectivist, or like essentially an expression of mass culture, right? And that mass culture, which we experience, like we are immersed in it, is inherently volatile. It's impossible to control. It takes things and you know, like if we look at how the internet just like gobbles up stuff and repurposes it and makes seemingly innocuous things into monstrous implements of some dark agenda. You know, like the example someone gave last session, which is perfect. Last time we were doing this was Pepe the Frog, right? Like, it's just a drawing of a funny frog, and it has become this like, I mean, one, it just like blew up and is fucking everywhere, and that in and of itself, that could be enough to make it kind of horrifying, right? That like an artist's own work, they don't control how it's interpreted or used, and so it just like spins out of control and becomes a thing, a big phenomenon. That is that kind of thing is definitely a theme in Paranoia Agent, which is one of the like points of reference for this playbook. It's an anime. So these things get taken in and become part of the like tool set that is used in the generation, this like machine that's just generating like ideas and culture, essentially. Where the fuck was I going with this? This is probably doing shit like this while you're tired. So yeah, so like it would be bad enough for the author of Pepe if it had just been like adopted by the internet and like taken over, and we can see that as a violation of like the integrity of their own art and their control over it, of their own expression, right? Like your own words being twisted and changed and flung back at you in this different way. But then also that it was adopted as a kind of mascot for hate groups and like all this kind of shit. I mean, the person who made Pepe in a society, you know, like, never mind that it wouldn't have been possible for it to grow this big, but if like the fucking social phenomena that was Pepe the Frog happened in a context where the author had like the patent on Pepe or the, you know, digital rights, copyright, etc., right, and could like make money off of it, they would be immensely wealthy. They would be like a powerful cultural icon. But it has been stripped of its author and exists as this like thing just kind of devoured by mass culture, which is super interesting. And so yeah, that everyone is involved in it, but no one owns it, and it's kind of like a force of nature. Like, you know, there's a reason that in like Games of Apocalypse World and stuff, you'll see like the internet as Psychic Maelstrom and shit like that, because it is totally this like thought storm, this like dangerous sea of information. And yeah, Lord Xandred, I think, Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, phone. You just sit down. You just chill. Okay. I'm busy. I'm working. Lord Xandred says, it seems like some of the impulses follow a path of something is wrong with the world and the best way to solve it is blank, but the solution is far overreaching. For example, depression is on the rise and moves trap everyone in their dreams to make them feel better. And yeah, last time on this stream, that was what we were talking about. We were like, these are people trying to, like, the virus is essentially could be viewed as a solution, right? It's this, you know, whoever this host is, probably, like, if they're the messianic figure, right? They probably view this as like, this is my like idea is the answer to all the world's problems, right? This is how I'm going to fix society. But that it, of course, like, turns monstrous, because even if you had a virus, like, say I made a biological virus that just made everyone happy, because of how viruses work, as soon as I put that out into the world, if it's successful, it just fucking infects everyone. Like, you can't control who gets infected or how. It starts propagating, and it's doing its own thing, and you made it, but you're not in control of it, and you don't like possess it once it's out there. And so you can't control what gets done with it, right? If we go back again to Pepe, right? Like, the author of Pepe can't control what Pepe the Frog is used for, or what Pepe the Frog represents or means to other people. He can just make the drawing initially. and later post a really sad video about how his own feelings about it. There's this like documentary microdoc kind of thing about the creator of Pepe the Frog, and it's sad because he's not down with fascism. Mads, I am not familiar with Plague Inc., but I would love some context because yeah, if it's sounding similar to this, well, yeah, and I mean, there's another thing, right? The idea of mutation, that once something is out there, that it will adapt and change, or that exposure to this wider population will affect it in turn. So, all of that to say, yes, Lord Xandrid, absolutely, something is wrong, and the best way to solve it is blank, right? Like all of these things could be about that. It could be viewed as like a monstrous attempt at solving a problem, which presumably will relate to what the PCs want in the world, because they will have a personal stake in what the conspiracy is about, what this ideological virus is going about its business with. Oh, that's interesting. So it's a game where you create a disease with the intention of wiping out the world, but it can, once in the population, mutate and become something unintended. That's funny. I like the idea of, like, something that is putting viruses out and needs to, like, work in waves and iterate. And it's like, oh, yeah, the first one we made had this thing where, like, it mutated and, you know, just everyone just grew green hair instead of, you know, dying. They just grew green hair. It was weird. We made the next virus. We tried to take out some of the DNA around the green hair thing. Because, yeah, there a complicated interaction exists between our idea virus and the people that it's infecting. I think I've played a game like that once where, yeah, there was the idea of, like, the profile, how low profile your disease is a thing, and that you, like, upgraded it as you infected more and more populations. So the idea was to make something that was really sneaky and benign at first, and then once it was infecting huge portions of the planet's population, and had, like, saturated the world, then you, like, ramped up its lethality because the world would, like, respond, and that was the, like, adversity in the game. So where those differ from this is that those are really impersonal, whereas we are going to be looking at there is this, like, massive, like, structurally present infection of ideology, but we don't address it on that level, right? Because in Girl by Moonlight, the oppression is always on a scale too large for us to directly fight, for the most part. And we might, at best, carve out a little, you know, niche. But the darkness is not something you just go punch in the face. Even when you're transcended, it's emissaries, it's minions, whatever. And so, while we might pick apart the conspiracy and find, you know, like, we might find this original host, right? But they're not the disease. They were just the host of it. And so, like, this person or this secret society or whatever, right? Like, this mind born in data, you might interact with it, speak with it, do something to it. You might pass a judgment upon it, but ultimately, it's out of the host's hands at this point. Already, as the game starts, it is out of their hands. And yeah, you know, it's all about, like, how literally a disease you want this thing to be. Because it's viral both in the sense of, like, a sickness, but also in the sense of a viral video or whatever, or a viral marketing strategy. Right? And, like, if we were to start giving a fuck about the, like, cleanliness of our information intake, then advertising is obviously garbage, right? It is obviously, like, marketing jingles and all this kind of shit are just like vectors of infection for a disease of your faculties, or like a virus that is being like sent into your faculties to try to subvert them into spending your money on shit that you wouldn't have otherwise. Um, and it preys off of some of the fundamental structures of your brain and the way that you're trained to think and the way that humans kind of are predisposed towards thinking. Um, so in so many ways, right, that feels very similar to a virus, right? Like NERPs, yeah, fucking the NERPs virus. It's a thing. And yeah, there's the also the idea that Logine is pointing out of like maybe this virus taking over is actually good, but just that the player characters find it to be monstrous or are afraid of embracing it or whatever else. And there's room for that in your story. I'm sure we could pivot around what that darkness actually is, or what kind of thing we're trying to like what our antagonism actually is could pivot in this playbook at the very least. The others have much more clear cut antagonism. Um, in that, like Starlight Kingdom, there is a big bad and you're fighting it. Uh, in Darkest Night, everything is bad, and like the player characters betray each other and stuff, and that's just like part of the story. Um, in Honesty of Stars, you're protecting the Bastion against stuff, but the Bastion itself is also like problematic. Um, but there's a clear like framework for how the antagonism works. This one, there's going to be the conspiracy, which is going to be like instead of the hideout or whatever else. I'm thinking like the investigation, the mystery, the conspiracy, whatever, and it's going to function similarly to our like bad shit funnel, in Darkest Night, where it's these kind of like story level things that we trigger or unlock or whatever. But in A Maze of Dreams, it's going to be stuff like, I have some notes about this. So some options might include like false leads. So we do a thing and we like as a playgroup we decide, oh, that was a false lead, and we check off the box for that, and that gives us some effect. I'm thinking of having these ones maybe be, whereas in Darkest Night it's like, yeah, we pick this thing and it happens. In this playbook I want it to be this thing happened and we get a thing. So yeah, we like followed a false lead, you might get some benefit. Changing who the prime suspect is, so if we have like, we're like, oh yeah, it's this guy that did it, we might choose an option where like we go and we confront that person and it turns out they're not the person responsible. This is like a classic trope, right, of like, I know that it was you, Baron von Snaggletooth, and then Baron von Snaggletooth is like, I was involved but in this weird way, like it wasn't me, I just happened to have a very suspicious name, not a lot of barons around, but it's not me, maybe it's someone else, but I know a guy or whatever, one of those kind of situations, that we might be able to like trigger confrontations, or big reveals. So the direction of like how those mechanics are going to work I haven't settled on, but this is an idea that I've been floating as well. Yeah, that you have like the red herring, right, these kind of tropes of mystery fiction, which and that it's essentially going to be like a big spiral towards the truth, right? The inevitable, like, we have figured out what is up, and then we check that box, and that's going to be like one season in play, is like the addressing of one mystery. And so that gives us both like a framing thing. It lets us know what kind of missions we might be going on. I don't want to make it quite so simple as just like you do this kind of mission and then this kind of mission and this kind of mission, that there's like a linear progression, but I want it to help establish, as we have done in previous playbooks, this idea of a rising action. So we've got like the opening, and then the mid game where we're really getting into it. We have a climax, and in this case, this corresponds with season end. Once we get through the climax, and then the denouement over here. God, writing with the mouse is the worst. Denouement happens between seasons. So we wanna guide our players through having these 3 acts. And then that triggers season end, which means that the MC changes. Which is a really important feature. And so we want to force this to happen because it's one of the rules of the game. We want to force the MC to change. And that it ties up nicely that one mystery leads to another in the next season. But that's going to be someone else. We get to pivot the series in another direction. Which is stuff that I'm really excited about, is these kinds of setups into, okay, now it's your turn. What is, Andrew did the first season of Girl by Moonlight Stargazers. In season 2, is it that, Sean is the MC now? Because, his character died or, fell to darkness at the end of season 1. Or, well, really season 2, because we had our season 1 that was fake. Right? And that we MC switch, and then we get this new, what is season 3 of Stargazers like? What themes do we explore in this season? And that's going to be different both as a thing that we all decide together, but also as an authorial thing from the MC in their position as being able to set a lot of that tone. And so season 1 might be really lighthearted, season 2 might get a little darker, but that's only going to last one season. Then in season 3, maybe we return to that lighter stuff and kind of bounce back out of it, or we dig deeper because everyone at the table gets to play and be like, oh yeah, I liked when it got a little darker. Maybe we want to go even darker. And then, Elf takes over and it gets super dark. And yeah, that because here's the thing about doing a mystery game, right? Is that there can't actually be any notion of who actually did it beforehand, right? With a novel, obviously the author knows who did it, and that's great. And reading through, you as the person reading can find out by reading the book, and that's wonderful. But when we're playing a story game where we play to find out what happens, that's a core fundamental part of the game. So none of us are allowed to know. And what that means is that we can play fun tricks on ourselves. We play as if it's this person, but then there is a prompt that we will hit, right? I'm thinking I'm going to add a line somewhere in this playbook that's just prime suspect. And we name who that is, right? We have the prime suspect and you put their name here. God, I'm really bad at drawing arrows with the mouse. So it's Bob. Bob is the prime suspect. And then there's going to be a prompt in our investigation thing down here that's just cool, this person didn't do it. And we all know that's going to come up at some point. But we don't know when or why. And we still don't know who really did it. And so it forces us to continue to dig into stuff and to play in a way that is both evocative and makes people seem like criminals or baddies or whatever, but to not ever commit, right? To never know for sure. And so it's something I want to try, and I think it will deliver this feeling of a mystery, but it's so hard. It's so hard to make that kind of gameplay work. I think this notion of being explicit about who we all think it is, but being clear that doesn't necessarily mean that's who it actually is really important. It's doing weird things with my cursor. I'm looking in the preview. It's funny. right? So that we as a table can play really hard towards one thing, as we must, but that we're always kind of uncertain. We're always doubting. Is it really this person? Or maybe the characters are really convinced, but the players know better, which can be really fun to play into. So there's kind of like a dramatic irony thing going on, as there has been with most of these playbooks, and that eventually will settle in on who it might be, and we'll go and confront them, and they'll do the big reveal, and then we will have us a boss fight, and we will sort it all out, because that's how you do. And that's like Persona does this fucking like 8 times in Persona 4, where they're like, it's this person. Oh no, it's actually this person. And midway through the game, you start suspecting, like, I think it's actually this other person, but we're gonna go look at this guy and this guy and this guy, first, and then eventually we're gonna end up here. And it's not. We're not gonna make our games tedious. We're not gonna let ourselves have a boring time. So I feel like asking players to do this is going to be a perfectly okay thing. So that's some very high level shit. Let's zero back in on like actually just filling out these lists. So, I just like went on a rant. See, I haven't watched Adam's Persona 5 playthrough. What I remember of it is it's super. There's like a clear main guy. There's like the corporation guy. But maybe I picked it. Maybe I saw some episodes that were like midway through or whatever. But it seemed like there was a really obvious, like, villainous figure. And whether I'm sure there's like some twist later where it's not actually that guy. But and that like that's fine. I think. I mean, it sounds like they maybe didn't handle it great in Persona 5, but I don't see that like narrative form as being inherently bad. We're just like peeling back the layers of baddies until we get to the like heart of it. Which, if I describe it that way, is not unlike how gameplay of Starlight Kingdom would work, right? Where we fight some low-level baddies, we have our like rivals and enemies and stuff that we have written into the game, and we kind of are dealing with them, and then eventually the MC is going to be like, and here's the fucking big bad for the season, boom, and we deal with that, right? Because we have to get to it. And yeah, this idea of like, sure, we know who the main villain is, but who are their agents? Yeah, that seems cool too, Mads. Like, I think that's a pretty nice way of looking at this whole conspiracy thing too, which I hadn't really considered. Is like, yeah, like the specific perpetrators don't really matter as much as the people who are, benefiting from this ideological virus that's playing out. And right, there could be some people who sure they didn't like start it, they didn't kick the whole thing off, but they're there profiting off of it. And those kinds of parasitic organisms are just as much a problem as the virus itself. And so we might spend some time fighting symptoms as opposed to the infection, that kind of thing. Yeah, I like Xandrid. I like this suggestion already of a choice for the mundane world could be protests and riots, right? Like anything that keys off of this idea of like mass culture, right? Of like large groups of people expressing their collective will, which is different from people's individual will. And yeah, because the darkness is essentially untouchable, we mostly deal with its hench people. So, did I put some good prompts in here for Mundane World? I think with Mundane World, I kind of hit a bit of a wall. Oh yeah, here we go. So rather than have what is held to be sacred and what is considered profane, my idea was to have what we hide even from ourselves. Oops, no. So this would be what shapes our dreams, and then what is considered profane becomes what we hide even from ourselves. right? And so the things that shape our dreams can still be all these things, right? Is it that we dream of like financial success? I need to get better standardization about what I capitalize and don't. Right, so we dream about money, order, power, tradition, control, possessions, edifices, organization, hatred. This to me all seems good. Right, are our dreams shaped by our hatred of each other or of things? Right, Logine. See, you're connecting some dots there. Like, yes, when I was MC for our game of Blades in season 2 of the Blades game on Elf's channel, I was kind of floating around some of this content in like I didn't know I was going to make this playbook, but it was just like, this is clearly something I'm interested in, right? So I had, there was what was called the collectivist revolution, and it was just like communism in Duskfall and like people trying to unionize. But the crew didn't delve deeply into its root causes. They were one of those parasites kind of making use of this ideological virus and the chaos it created to then continue to do crimes. But basically, what that was it was manufactured. It was a manufactured revolution by a cabal of ghosts who possessed a couple key people, and used them to propagate this ideological virus, which showed up as eels, these like ghostly eels in people's brains. So like they're burying their faces in people's brains. And so the whisper of the crew, which was Elf's character Thorn, was able to actually like perceive these brain eels. And one of the crew members like voluntarily was like, I want to have the brain eels. I'm into the communism. And so some stuff like that was really fun. And so yeah, it's just like this is always a notion that I find compelling. Yeah, you know what, Mads? I'm gonna make a request to you, which is, can you please, because you're always like, I see you a lot in chat being like, oh yeah, this reminds me of like this media and this media and this media. So you seem to have a really good like kind of media library and understanding. And I see these things in chat that you post, and I'm like, yeah, that would be cool. And then like I'm doing a thing and I forget. I would love it if you were to just like email me some like a reading list essentially. That would be so helpful for me because I've been looking for more like media that seems relevant. And some folks floated another anime around. There's one that like Dave was really into called like, what was it, Psycho-Pass or something. So that's another one I'm going to look into. But yeah, I would appreciate it if Mads, you specifically, sent an email to commutingcrow@gmail.com with some of these suggestions, because you've been like super on point, I feel like, with the media referencing. So my hope is that in the context of the mundane world, it will make sense who we are, what our dreams are. Yeah, Mads, that would be much appreciated. Also, I will just call out the fact that Mad Piero TV, aka Mads, is well on her way with her hack of Blades in the Dark called Misbehaving, which is like a Prohibition era urban fantasy Mads. I know that there's a certain level of like, there's magic and shit, so I mean, because it's Blades hack, it should include some generally, but yeah. So you can check out Misbehaving, which is another Blades hack, probably one that will actually be done before mine. Well, you should hit me up sometime. We could play test it. Yeah, Prohibition era urban fantasy, which is great. Sounds great. So we have what shapes our dreams and what we hide even from ourselves. And this can apply to the players as well. The players are part of the mundane world. They live in it. But this also speaks more broadly to like society at large. It's just really clumsy to use language like that and to be overly specific in these things, I've been finding. So if I want to be like, what shapes society's dreams, it's not as evocative as what shapes our dreams, right? Like, if I say to you society versus us, right, that's context is very different, and I want this to grab people and to feel like it includes them, so that they can have a stake in it and make their comment. So, in terms of what the mundane world actually is, I loved riots, protests and riots. I think it was great. And like, I'm realizing more and more that this one is like, this series playbook is like built out of a lot of my impressions of the world of like America in 2017. And so protests and riots fits perfectly. Yeah, so this one might end up being like pushing people into political stuff, because it is about ideologies, and that's, politics is the kind of arena in which ideologies ostensibly less and less today, I feel, but in which ostensibly ideologies are at play. And so, yeah, protests and riots is great. This is very like true to 2017 USA. But here I'm going to, contradict myself and say, but also I really want to bring in heavy notes of the mundane world that we see in Serial Experiments Lain, and the way that the mundane world functions in that show is really on point for like what my notion for this series playbook is. So it's an idea of like, and I'm just going to carry my note down from above. So like the mundane world. Fuck, what did I say? What were my own fucking words? I can just copy and paste it, and I'm going to. The mundane world belongs to everyone and no one. This might even like be a statement that I make about the mundane world explicitly, and then have a list to choose from. So let's do it like this. The mundane world belongs to everyone and no one. Choose one or two. We'll put it up there for now, at the very least. So, like, I want this setting to be slightly cyberpunk in the way that, like, we are all living in a cyberpunk dystopia right now. It's just a matter of, like, as William Gibson said, how evenly distributed the future is. Right, control of the mundane world belongs to everyone and no one, is what you're getting at, Mads? Which I think is what I'm trying to express as well. I don't know if I want to expressly put the word control in there, because the game being about control is something that the players get to decide. And I mean, certainly, like, all these things are at play all the time in all modern Western human interactions. They often feature money and power and tradition and, structures of order and control and possessions and all these kinds of things. Yeah, the virus. So Logine asks, so the virus is a wave of strange behavior by the society standards. I think more extreme might be the way to look at it, because it's not necessarily like totally incongruous with what's been going on, but it's like a response to what's been going on. So it might be that, your society has always been kind of racist, or quite racist, or, extremely racist, but has become more polite about it in recent years, and then goes back to being really extreme about racism again. It might be like that. Smog and Haze is another good thing from Xandred in terms of like characterizing the setting. Like these feel a lot like color, for like the the kind of urban backdrop, right? That we have smog and haze, or we have protests and riots. I want to do a little bit more like getting to the heart of it stuff to start out, which is traditionally what I've been doing with this section of the lists. So some like what physically is the space, right? Like an isolated city-state, an ancient fortress, a massive derelict warship. But then we go into stuff like quarantined and sealed, martial law, inquisition, rebellion, and strife. And my idea in structuring it this way is that it helps people with the idea of like choose one or two. So it might be that we're happy with an isolated city-state. If we choose a second one, I feel like we're more likely to read this like 1-2 punch as being one from each of these options, which I think makes the most sense. You could do 2 from the end, so it's a world. The last bastion of humanity is quarantined and sealed and has an inquisition, or only has an inquisition and rebellion and strife, and we don't draw on these specific prompts and end up describing some stuff kind of that we make up. And right, if you don't take some of these more like what is the society like prompts versus what are the physical spaces like, you end up filling that out anyways. You're just not using the prompt to do it, which again is all fine. And that, so in our other playbooks here, we have like a dystopic society, a metropolis, poverty and hardship, wealth and affluence, a society in ruins, a pristine and sterile world, a city cut off from the world. This one includes a lot less like on the ground specifics of the physical space. Starlit Kingdom has a few more call-ons for like specific places, but again is also pretty random capitalized thing. Like futuristic arcology is definitely what is the physical space like, big city, small town. But then a lot of the other ones are, I would say all of these fit into the kind of color category. Because like a rural community, this isn't actually like a specific space the way that like a small town is. And then we have massive corporations, authoritarian government, religious persecution, and class struggle. Classic kind of big picture stuff for our society. This one, we can kind of be more interested in aesthetics, like strict aesthetics, because we have this stuff, which is really about society more directly. Building this all backwards. How would you describe a city that is just building on top of what is already there? I mean, like, I would describe that as like an urban accumulation, which maybe is a fun thing to put in here. Urban accumulation. So we should, drop the sprawl reference here, right? Sprawling megacities, because we want to encourage some cyberpunky thoughts in here. And like, if I were to set about, because here's the other useful kind of thought exercise for setting these up. If I were to set about describing to you the city that I saw when I watched Serial Experiments Lain, I would say it's like densely urban. It's loud. It's full of people. It's like intensely crowded. I mean, yeah, something that is crowded seems essential. I'm just going to write a bunch of words and then we'll actually like condense these into prompts. So I'm just going to do a line break so I can keep my thoughts collected. So crowded, urban, like there will be no non-urban options in this list, I want to say. That it's like loud and like intense in terms of color. It's not shape. Dark. I want something. I mean, like oppressive, but that's not necessarily. Like we don't need to say that. We already kind of know. Um, right, but this idea of like an intensely like sensory overloading. Sensory overload is definitely a big theme here, right? Yeah, right, Mads. Like we want to when we talk about the game's setting, Mads is saying, this makes me think of Times Square at night, right? Like that's the kind of urbanism I want to evoke. Is this like this thing that can only exist today, where we have like like media saturation. Media saturation is definitely sticking around. You are on the team. Media saturation, right? Like a world that is like the mundane world is really bright and colorful and like caustic in this way. It's like highly demanding of your attention. It assaults every one of your senses, as many senses as it can. It is constantly trying to like inject itself into your mind. Like it's just everything is over, right? It's overcrowded, it's overly bright, it's just like it's too much at all times. And that's what we want to evoke, and we want to find some interesting ways of prompting people to make these kinds of cities. Um, and so I think this notion of like sterile futurism, like the iPhone world, doesn't exist here. It's not allowed. It's too serene. Whereas what we want is really like gritty and chaotic. Yeah, I think claustrophobia, like that, it's oppressively like close, in your face kind of setting. I don't know if I'm sure there's a word that isn't like claustrophobic, um, that gets at because like yeah, if you are like a person is claustrophobic, but a setting isn't necessarily best described that way. I'm sure there's a word for like a place that would cause you to feel that way. It's getting to be dark outside, and the window is doing that thing where it looks like the fucking void of death, and I don't want to stare into it quite yet. Right, the Moto with all the attachments, not the iPhone. Yeah. Yeah, I like towering. How can we just like looming spires, sprawling megacities, um, media saturation? I think is a fine thing to say about the mundane world that is like saturated with media. Um, we could do like put the word brooding in there. These kinds of like this whole like writing exercise portion of making these series playbooks is really challenging. Um, Finding these precise words that we want. Yeah, Logine, that's kind of this idea of like being your own jailer or your own oppressor is definitely what's at play here, right? Because if like if we are hiding things from ourselves, so we're like into like a self-denial mode, right? We're saying that society is like that, and we're also saying that our aspirations are being right, because you can read dreams as like our aspirations. um, are being shaped by someone else. We're not in control of what we want in this setting, kind of by merit of these two prompts. Yeah, that's a little too Gotham Mads, because we want to be in a very modern space, as opposed to like a retro kind of vibe or like an Art Deco vibe. Um, so let's see what we've actually got here. Looming spires, sprawling megacities, media saturation, protests and riots, smog and haze. I just want the words. I want words like crass and crowded to be in here. Like crass consumerism is always good. All right, so we've got our high rises covered. We've got our like Los Angeles style, just like endless sprawling. Um, what are some other things we can say about the physical space? We also have like smog, which you could view as like a locational thing. Um, I need to put a comma here. What are some other good features of urbanization? Like, I mean, we can just do like crowding and I think we'll just call it the press of bodies. Right, the idea of just being like crushed up against other people. Um, and we need to keep these. This is the thing I always feel I need to stress is like these need to be so general and so open ended, because we are, in as much as we're trying to like shape a conversation, we want to leave room for there to be a conversation as well. Um, and so I'm trying to avoid pushing my like specific vision in and just trying to get things on the page that will push people, nudge people in that direction and let them spin it. And so staying at that like initial level of the prompt can be really difficult because once you start writing prompts, you're then reading them and you're trying to like extrapolate. Um, and I find I kind of like rein the horse in and keep it real broad strokes. I think I can leave this for now. This is pretty good. Because we're choosing only one or two from this list. So we have like, my group chose Looming Spires and Media Saturation. So we did a very Times Square thing. Or my group chose Sprawling Megacities and Smog and Haze. Like it's fucking LA. Or um, we chose The Press of Bodies and Protests and Riots. And it was all about the like human aspect of the setting was what we chose to emphasize. Um, because we're also going to talk about the dreaming in the next section, and that'll let us dive into the setting in some different ways too. I'm just going to add this here so I don't forget. We're going to talk about the dreaming. So the last thing to look at in this column is, do we want to add anything to either of these sections? So we have what shapes our dreams, and what we hide even from ourselves. The only thing I have changed about these across the line, let me look at it. I think I added the individual as being sacred for in Darkest Night. Yeah, we've got the individual here. Oh yeah, and then we added hope for Honesty of Stars. Starlit Kingdom just has the like default bit, which I think is what we have here. Yeah, we just have the Starlit Kingdom one. I'm wondering if there's anything else we need to add. I think we can add sex. This is casting sex in a negative light, though. I might put it down here. Here is the question. Does sex shape our dreams? Do we view it as part of, like, the mechanism of, you know, society's oppression, or do we view it as a release from that? Y'all are like, put it in both, and that's kind of what as soon as I did this, I was like, is it both? I think it's kind of fun to just be like, yeah, sex is in both. It could be what shapes our dream, and we could be hiding that from ourselves. I'm just going to change it to sexuality. For both cases. I mean, you could have one be sex and the other be sexuality, too. That's definitely something we could do. Just getting endlessly called by this number I don't recognize. It's great. Because, like I agree with what y'all are saying, right? Is like, yeah, of course, society uses sex all the time. And it's true, but what do I as a game designer want to emphasize? And I like having a duality of it being in both because of what that says about it. That we can, and that it's separate from love, right, is an important statement as well. Or any of these other things. But that, like, there is the version that shapes our dream, and there could be a version that we hide from ourselves, and that those two are different. That it is both a means of oppression and a form of liberation from it, or can be for some people. So. I'm sorry, Ash, you can't see how long this has been up for, but we've been going for about an hour. And so Maverick asks, in this setting, who controls sexuality? How is that subverted? And do you speak about normativity versus self-expression? So we definitely have this notion of, like, here, the mundane world belongs to no one and to everyone and no one, and that the things that shape our dreams and the things that we hide from ourselves are kind of about the mundane world as well. And that it is a feature of that, which is to say that sexuality belongs to everyone and no one. And we're going to be doing a lot of talking about how the mundane world is mass culture, and that the dreaming is our own personal space within it. And that these questions here are going to change to be about, let's see, I wrote it down. I will refer to my notes like a good little designer. Yeah, so we have what uncomfortable truths have we embraced, and how do we defy the dreaming's form and order? Um, which is to say, how are we the opposite of these things, right? How are our dreams, we reject having our dreams shaped by these things, and we aren't lying to ourselves about this stuff down here, but that everyone else is. Also, hi Ash, welcome to the stream. I'm very slowly losing my voice, but here we are. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill these in right now, because I think they're good statements. Or they're actually questions, but you know what I mean. What uncomfortable truths have we embraced? And how do we defy the dreamings what was it? Defy the dreaming's form and order. Oh, and Ketters is here. Okay, Ash, you can tell me then what is the deal with the dreaming? Maybe I'll just change it to the dream with a capital D. So this is someone's culture that I'm using. I have no idea, so my apologies. Let me see if I use it anywhere else in this document. I think I haven't used the dreaming. I maybe did vaguely know about this and have been avoiding it for that reason. Let me just do a quick scrub and make sure. I mean, it's a really powerful sounding thing, this idea of the dreaming. Ash, I would appreciate if you could give me a little bit of info on it. It's also not your job to do so, so don't feel obligated to. First section near the end. Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, this is all going to go, by the way. This is going to get replaced with another list of prompts, but it's good to be clean about what I am using. So, the dreaming or dream time is the era of mythology in Australian Indigenous culture that continues on in life today. Okay, cool. So it's it is both a like period in the like historical sense, but it's still we're still within it, and that it indicates this notion that like of the living reality of a like so-called mythology. Yeah, that's. I mean, that all sounds totally amazing, and also like not something that I own or like am entitled to access to. So I'm gonna leave it out of my fucking game. That's for sure. And not even like yeah, I will avoid pointing to it in ignorance because I didn't really know that was a thing. But oh yeah, and White Wolf actually appropriated that, so we want to avoid it for that reason as well. Okay, great. Oh yeah, because like the Fae operate within something like that as well, right? I mean, this is certainly dealing with similar notions, but yeah, changeling, right? Yeah, totally. Okay, so instead of our character's origin, and I think again I have some notes here. Right, so we've got why do we breach the barrier of dreams? Yeah, the less I can be like White Wolf, the better, I think, is the stance I will take. They got they have a big appropriation problem, which I don't think they're not like a huge monolithic company that can like rectify it necessarily, but I don't feel confident that they have done so. Let's see, what else do I have in here? And then some other stuff that I wanted to include was like how we navigate the dream. There are like a bunch of questions that I want to pose in here. And then that transcendence and roles might both be tied up in this idea of like how we present within the dream versus in the mundane world. Yeah, Ash, I think I was like around for some of that conversation. Like I was watching, because I watched that whole series. I might have just like not retained some of the talking about the dreaming, or like I didn't have enough context for it to really like parse correctly in my mind. But yeah, I think it was very cool of you to take that stance of like, I will see if I can talk to these people and get their permission, and if I can't, I won't co-opt their story. Holy shit, Ketters, you were gonna play in like your first ever like in-person like face-to-face role-playing game experience? That's super awesome. Yeah, I don't think White Wolf is like bad. They're just kind of ignorant and did some things, made some decisions from a place of ignorance. Um, and I don't know. I don't want to repeat that kind of error as a designer that has so often plagued the role playing game industry. Because of course we do not call things that are, in person, face to face. We don't call that IRL because the internet is real life. At most, it is AFK. Well, I wish you all the best in that pursuit, Ketters, because I'm really into playing role playing games, and I hope that other people are able to get enjoyment from that. So, this notion of why do we breach the barrier of dreams, which is kind of like, like why are we the protagonists? What are we about? And this one is tricky for me, right? Like, what are the kinds of things that prompt these people to go do this? Like, why are we like this in the first place? And so, as I must always do, oops, gosh, I'm messing up. Why is everything gray? What have I done? It seems that I applied one of my colors in my little swatches over here to this text field by way of a hotkey that I didn't know existed. No? Oh, I changed the opacity. There we go. Right, I can just undo shit. I don't know why I was so freaked out. I can literally just step back in my history. I'm such an idiot. Okay, so. And let's start with the most fundamental and work our way out. So we've got Our origin. Reincarnation of interstellar royalty, hidden magical kingdom, parallel timeline, transported from the past, embodiment of the stars, organized rebellion. And then we've got the price we paid, duped into serving the darkness, power at a terrible cost, the veil of reality torn aside, dark seeds blooming in our hearts, doomed heroes reborn, test subjects in dark experiments. So this one is like more directly about getting power. This one is about being part of some like continuity. Right, like they mostly point backwards. I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup here. Because I've been meaning to eliminate capitalization from the lists, which my first series playbook is guilty of. So yeah, these mostly are relating to like history and established stuff, and also like a separate parallel structure, be it an actual parallel timeline or just like we're from a hidden magical kingdom, that we are like distinctly not mundane. Here we might have been mundane, but we got like given this power by something. In On a Sea of Stars, it's like why are we the pilots? This needs a question mark. And so we have doomed volunteers, elevated by the authorities, vat-grown, born special, chosen by the engines, exposure to the Leviathans, marked by fate, or our own drives and ambition is what lets us be pilots. So I think it's kind of going to be more like this in tone. Yeah, and so like why do these people, like why are they able to, and also why do they choose to? Kind of want to sum up both. Um, Although I think maybe it's just like the choice is what gives you the power, and it's just about being motivated to make it. Um, right. So like the way it is currently, it implies that the why is what matters, not the how. Um, which I kind of like actually. I think it's neat. Ugh. Gosh, I'm such a wreck. I need to actually like fix my body for in time for the weekend because I'm playing in a bike polo tournament this weekend, and I like wrecked myself at work on Tuesday. Yeah, like why do we do it? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to gain? This one is hard. I'm just going to come back to it later because it's too hard. Things and stuff. So obligation obviously needs to now be the waking world. And so this is what we do while we're awake. It's not going to be quite as dark and twisted as these last ones. But like the default obligations are too, they don't fit us into the like horrifying, dehumanizing sprawl kind of vibe that we want. Also that the waking world and the dream are right next to each other, I think is great. So this needs to be like office, job, what are some good like things that people have to do in their day-to-day lives as like I mean in our current world, but also in like a kind of cyberpunk skewed setting. right? Like, this is kind of what the office job really is. It's just like sifting through information or like absorbing information. And I'm just writing. I'm not keeping a lot of these, I don't think, but I'm just gonna write stuff like absorbing media. Could be a fun one. Like we just watch TV all day. That's all everyone does. I mean, yeah, like school, parenting. So yeah, I don't like that. This is just like that you have a job isn't enough. We need to characterize it more. But then, like, I don't want to just list a bunch of professions. Um, so really, what we need to do instead is like characterize a bunch of things in abstract terms, and then let people like re-parse them into specific things. Um, I mean, it might just be that I'm getting tired. I'm not thinking correctly. But all the best people are here. So rather than be like you have an office job or a whatever job, it just needs to be like mind numbing repetitive work, mind numbing repetition. All right, we can just characterize a lot of this stuff. Um, and I mean, what is an office job if not mind numbing repetition? Um, Boredom and despair. Yeah, Banff, this is kind of where I'm going, right? It's this idea of like adjectives around it. So, yeah, that it's grueling, it's boring, it's miserable, depressing, whatever. Um, and so, yeah, I like the idea of having one that's kind of like isolating, but I'm not sure what that would be like. I also like the idea of having of like dirty jobs and the effect those have on your like social position and stuff like that. Yeah, being like detached from the product of your labor. Um, so we could just do isolation and detachment. Um, Grueling, dirty work. And yeah, Banff, I think that's a great suggestion of fruitless labor, right? For this idea of like being dissociated from the product of your labor. And of course, morally compromising is great. So we can have mind numbing repetition, boredom and despair, isolation and detachment, grueling, dirty work, fruitless labor, or morally compromising jobs. Yeah, I think these are great. Thank you all for your help. Um, and then that we are going to need to characterize the dream, and the dream as like funhouse mirror to the mundane world. Um, because of course, if you have a mind-numbing and repetitive job, it's not like you dream the most exciting dreams. It's not the opposite of your day-to-day life. It's just like you dream of doing your mind-numbing repetitive job in this like strange other context.
So then how do we use prompts to kind of push people in that direction? I could do the thing where I just ask them questions, right? I think maybe questions is the best bet here. So like, so we can have like, how does the dream reflect the mundane world? Because we know that certain things shape our dreams, right? So this is just getting them to like narrow in on what that is about. And this is where I can ask the ever important question of how do we find our way in the dream? I mean, some of y'all are coming up with great like answers to these prompts, right? Of being like, yeah, we're choosing this prompt and this is what I'm making with it. But I'm happy with this set of them just because they're pretty general and express the vibe that we want, and I don't want to have like an infinite range of things that we can choose here. So right, how do we know if we're in the dream or out of it? That's an excellent question. You know, like Inception does that, where it's like, this is how I know this is my token or whatever. Um, it's a very important question in this kind of fiction, um, and it's as much like interesting thematic device as it is just like necessary logistical thing for the audience. Just be like, so is this the real world or not? And as I mean, there's all the like theorizing. There's all the epileptic trees vibes with Inception of people being like, was he just a dream the whole time, etc. Well, we already know what shapes the dream, right? Because we've got what shapes our dreams down here. So I don't want to repeat myself necessarily. Um, yeah, Ash, this is a thing that I've heard, is that the part of your brain that does language isn't like available while you're dreaming, so you can't actually like read. Um, I mean, Logine, that's a question. Yeah, do we want to have it be like the dream with a capital D is different than when you're just like asleep and having a dream? Um, I feel also like how do we find our way into the dream with a capital D kind of gives us a sense of like, yeah, how we get into and out of it. It covers that whole thing and also gives us a little more. So it's beyond just like getting into and out of it, but also navigating within it. And then when we get into transcendence, this is going to be about like how we present within it. And I'm tempted to add a question that's more like personal, like how are we different in the dream? But we already have how does the dream reflect the mundane world and how we find our way within it. Like I feel like in the course of answering these three questions, also how we know when we're in the dream, we might suss out those answers, um, and that might create we have to imagine the conversation that happens around these questions and the details of the setting that's going to fill out for us. So I'm feeling pretty confident with just these three. And three is a good number. So with transcendence, though, we can actually talk about more specifically, like, what do we look like in the dreams. Do we want to change this to be like our true selves? Or like, I'm just gonna cancel all that. It might be that I leave it, we keep calling it transcendence, but I just change these to suit better. So if we want to go in the persona vibe, right, then it's not really about transformation. We have our like other world self that we might want to describe. Um, yeah, I think Banff. I think I agree with this notion of needing to include like how we see ourselves, right? Like it's just too fundamental. Right, like this is kind of the waking dreaming uh, counterpoint thing, right? Of like how the world sees us is our jobs, and then in the dream we get to like express our we get to live our truth in various other trans analogs. Look at me go. Um, right, in the idea that we like embrace the stuff that other people hide from themselves. Um, we could also fit those in here. So they kind of fit in with this topic. Because there's kind of this then follow up question, right? Of like, what would happen if anyone found out that we were like this? Would something bad happen to us? Would they not believe us? I like the idea of us needing to be secret, and I think I'm going to keep this. Like, how does the world see us? Once we know what our obligation is, we then characterize like what status does that assign us? Should the world even deign to notice us at all? Right, so here we highlight status collected, like, the mass scale of things, the dehumanizing of people, and then in the dream, everything is like deeply personal and specific. And so let's start talking about transcendence, right? Because we want to do, I think, a very persona inspired spin on transcendence, where it's not so much that I transform as much as I like project something forth. Um, which makes me start thinking about incorporating some of the engine mechanics into into this, of having like your projection, right, your avatar or whatever, um, having like an agenda that's parallel to yours but separate, that you can like play into or against. Um, so we could bring in. Okay, here is a notion. Do we bring in virtues and impulses? Uh, and attach them to. We don't need to do all this stuff, right? Of having like strength. Although we could. It could be a little bit more like there's a thing you need to maintain that is your like access to power, and if this goes away, you can't transcend. Like if all your strength of your avatar or whatever is gone, we'll call it avatar for the purposes of this discussion. And if we did have this avatar, our avatar could be. We would come up with a different list of. We might not come up with a different list of virtues and impulses. These are pretty good. And we can use a lot of the same mechanics, which is nice. And yeah, like they're not set in stone. They can shift around. The idea of like one virtue, two impulses, one impulse set at creation, and then another um, sealed with a dark bargain, as I say in my rules. Well, and that's kind of the implied notion, right? Is that this avatar that I project is like a version of myself that is both like more me and like kind of inhumanly so, like that a pure enough expression of identity um, is kind of like horrifying or scary or inhuman or alien. Um, yeah, we could bring these things in if we want to center stuff around it. Um, I'm not entirely sold that I want to center this so much on this stuff. I mean, this definitely brings forth a theme around identity, um, which, right, we have like ideas and ideologies as virus, um, identity versus anonymity, and like a third place priority of having like sex and sexuality feature within the playbook. Um, I don't know. I think if we want to really lean into the persona direction, it completely makes sense to do this hack of my own hack to hack engines into this playbook. Um, it wouldn't need to be as weighty as the engines are in On a Sea of Stars, because this is like super about the engines. The engines are a really big deal. Even if we just look at like the real estate that we dedicate to the engines, it's like a hefty chunk. I mean, it's the only information we know about Transcendence, which is actually an oversight, and I'm going to fix. We need to have a little bit more about Transcendence and then how it relates to the engines. Because I drifted outside of my original, more simplistic view of this playbook, where it was like engines and Transcendence were synonymous. But I realized down the line that didn't make sense, because you would just always be transcended in missions where you're like piloting your mechs, which is lame. because it means that you get to make 6 rolls and then you like bail out of your mech, which is just ludicrous. It's silly. And so then it would have meant needing to like make all these new mechanics around extending Transcendence and have that be the huge thing. And it was just like created this bookkeeping nightmare. Whereas what I instead settled on making sense is the like there's piloting your engine, which is one thing, and then there's like Transcendence, which is this like next tier in where you become a huge badass, and are like amped up for a little bit, which we see as a trope when people like go into their like super pilot mode, in various ways. But then I didn't account for that shift in my envisioning of it, and so it's missing a section where it talks about Transcendence and what that looks like. And yeah, like whether or not it's like you have to be piloting an engine in order to transcend. Maybe you can transcend outside of it, but it just has this like lessened effect as a result. There's a whole design conversation that I neglected in the process of making this playbook. Whereas this notion that we're talking about now of doing the like persona style, like you project this avatar and that's your Transcendence, actually works the way I was originally envisioning the engines working. Yeah, Madarick, exactly. Like in Ava, when the Avas went berserk, for example, would be a good thing of like, oh yeah, that's when Shinji transcends because he's fucking trash and he just needs his weird alien mom robot to protect him. But it's another story. And so it works more cleanly here in the way that I originally envisioned, which is a much more like straightforward, simple drift of the rules. So we can view In a Maze of Dreams as being like a halfway point between Starlit Kingdom and On a Sea of Stars as far as this mechanic goes, where like the idea of the engine exists as this like avatar that you project, but it is not so mechanically weighty as to be this like completely separate thing in the way that the engines are. So yeah, and like we can walk around in the dream untranscended without like projecting this avatar of our like ideal self, and the fiction doesn't like break down the way like if we're doing mecha fiction and we spend half the mission not in our freaking mecha, like what is the point, right? It doesn't make any sense. And how do we even engage with the stuff that's on that scale, right? So there's a fair argument for incorporating that. We need to fit it in here. It would just replace Transcendence. And similarly to On a Sea of Stars, we would have a bit that's just like, this is what's up, right? So it would be like, avatars are a projection of your like idealized identity, but they are separate from you. They have their own like thoughts, feelings, and agendas. And so we can then we can have some mechanisms, right? Like similarly to this, where we would ask some questions and then we would say, okay, cool. So everyone make your character's avatar. We don't need to, right? Because whereas the engines get shared around, they don't necessarily stay with one pilot, and are like exist outside of the character. The avatars would actually, you would have to record them on your sheet. We don't have infrastructure for that, so they would have to be pretty simple. If they're going to have strength, then we do need to put that on the crew sheet. So we could have a little section where there are like 6 spaces, because Actually, no, we can do 4 spaces, not 6. I'm being dumb. Because we're going to have between 3 and 4 players. And then the MC. There should never be more than 4 player characters for the game to work correctly. So we'll just do a little thing with 4. So we could just take... We don't need name. We would just do virtue, impulses, strength. We would actually, it would be the character's name. Yeah, you would name your avatar too. So yeah, I would just take these like top 4 things and be like bloop. It would be like, instead of the hanger, this would be like your avatars. We would copy this over. There's plenty of room. We can still fit this whole thing. We can still fit all of our rules drifting, which is going to include some kind of like sex and intimacy move, and then not a whole lot else. This one doesn't need a lot of custom mechanics. It will need some description of how this works, but we can probably fit that in this area. It also gives us more room to have bigger columns of prompts, because these all get they're a little bit wordy, a lot of the impulses and stuff. Nature of the conspiracy might be a bit smaller than this. We might save a line here, which would get us just inside of our range that we can permit. Okay. I'm going to save this here, and I'm going to start talking about this, and we'll see how far we get on this. So, your avatar is a perfect expression of your identity and will. It lives inside you, but has its own thoughts, emotions, and desires, and is alien to you. And then we can ask some questions. So what are some questions we have about the avatars? And which ones can I just steal? Which ones have I already written that apply? What dark secret are they hiding? Sounds great. What do they yearn for? Sounds great. What names are they given? These all sound great. These are perfectly good questions. Let's just pluralize this, because why not? I mean, Yash. That's what this game's about. If you're not having some trans feels while playing my game, you're not looking hard enough. Right, so we've got like, what do they yearn for, which I think is a really powerful thing to ask generally about all of them, right? Do they want to be like free of their hosts? Do they want their hosts to become them? Do they want you to like never, right? Would it like kill them if you were to become them? All this kind of stuff. I mean, like, you play games to escape your crippling gender dysphoria. I write a game to explore my feelings of gender dysphoria and to force other people to feel it. So, you know, if it might be that my game's not for you, or that you can find some space within it that feels more comfortable. Ooh, yeah. I like this from Login of like, what do you fear in them? I'm not quite happy with the wording. I want to refine that a little bit. I mean, we have already established that they are alien to you, which I think is an important step. Yeah, Ash, I'm also. I have found that I am just like the most evil Blades GM, and that it carried over. So like even when I was running Starlit Kingdom, I was just like, I was fucking brutal about everything. Within the like range of the themes that offers. Um, and so, yeah, like I feel like folks who are like deep in these kinds of themes are just so much better able to like twist the knife. So I think you'll do great. Yeah, like what makes them scary? Why do you fear yours? I think is what I will ask. So this is like everyone individually has to be like, why am I afraid of my ideal self? That's such a fucking rude question. And making it personal, again, I think is really important. To just occasionally dip into like you personally have a stake in this. Cool. And then we just literally steal this thing. Oops. Push the wrong enter button. Describe it, name it, and assign it one virtue and one impulse. Great. Right, and this is just like this idea of engines can feed back into the other playbooks because it's basically just my uh, hacking of cohorts from Blades. So the way that you would have like gangs or specialists in Blades, I took that and made it work for engines, and now we can swing it back into a more generic form. And we might go back into Starlit Kingdom and be like, cool, you can have like John suggested in our chat back in August, the idea of having like the mascot character be be a cohort instead of a like a player character, and then I might just have like a really simple rule set for making that happen, right? And be like, in Starlit Kingdom, you have like you start with this cohort. Right, and then yeah, like this all ties into people becoming their like darkest selves perfectly, right? That it's like an interplay between their avatar and themselves. And like all of it is about your relationship. Like all the darkest selves are kind of about your relationship to your power in a way as well. So, and about like confronting yourself. So it makes sense, right? It fits fine. Um, we got lots of good questions in this, and I like that it's the kind of more mystery oriented playbook, and that it's full of questions. It has more questions in the prompts section than the others do, to get people on that track. This we need to replace. Absolutely need to replace this. right? Because like On a Sea of Stars has Our Last Hope. The bad one, aka In Darkest Night, has Our Tragic Fate. You only get an Ultimate Destiny if you're playing Starlit Kingdom, so... Yeah, I don't want to have a separate sheet or anything, so it's a matter of like squeezing cohort space into, because like it fucking grinds me up that I cannot fit all of my relevant rules for I have some notes to myself about how to make this playbook a little bit better, because the layout on it has been really difficult because there's a lot of extra stuff, and the fact that I can't fit all of my rules changes for this series playbook in here pisses me off. It makes me upset. And so the fact that I have to put some stuff in the rulebook bothers me, which is weird. I know I can move this up and actually get a couple extra lines and maybe fit another piece of content in here. Now that I've got the hanger dialed in, there's like this little space here that I could eliminate. So there's some efficiencies I can gain in here. I could also move these. I have a note to myself about compressing the center and putting, so like moving all of this up to here, and then I could have a section below Transcendent Abilities that was about engine stuff. Fire that all in there so it doesn't have to live here, and then maybe moving the flagship over and giving it a little bit more breathing room. Oh, and then I forgot to include a recovery clock for engines, which is going to go in the top right corner, which is something that the avatars, the personas, will not require. So version 2 of that sheet is going to get there. And yeah, this one is just like, it's so dense compared to the others. If we go to... This is the next most dense one, and I have so much fucking space. Right? And like there's a big gap in here. There kind of needs to be some space around the abilities because you can add crew abilities from another source, and there's like nowhere to write those down. Like, look at my extremely primitive first layout. It's like so simplistic and basic. And to go from that to this, where it's just like, this is so full of text, is pretty wild. And like very dense text in this corner. So it's a big challenge trying to include all this information. And it is my like deep dark desire to try to make it so that the rulebook is just, this was the like principle that I came at it with, just to talk some high level shit about the game. I was like, cool, I will have a rule book, and that will be the base game. And then if you know everything in the rule book and you pull a series playbook that has everything else that you'll need to play, that's the goal, right? So like, I don't want to have it be that you have to print 2 sheets. I would want it to all be on 1 sheet. That's another design notion, right? Of like the game, the like series playbook is a single piece of paper. I don't want it to be like D&D has the problem of like, yeah, my character sheet is actually like 5 pieces of paper. I got my spell list over here. Like, it's just too much stuff. I just want to have like one thing right there. If I were to, you know, you could switch to legal, which would get you an extra like 2 or 3 inches on the outside edge here. And if I were using legal, I could turn these into trifolds like the old Apocalypse World playbooks, which were designed to be like double-sided pamphlet-style things, which would get me like more than double the surface area, but gives you different layout problems because everything has to be in these narrow columns, which we're halfway there, right? Because we kind of have like page 1, page 2, page 3. But I really like the Blades sheets, the way that they're laid out. I mean, John is really good at layout. He's a freaking graphic designer. um, and that they're just like delightfully condensed into one thing. So yeah, what Ash is saying is she uses trifold A4, which is in America they call it legal. Yeah, yeah, or in Europe as well, it's called A4, right? Sorry, it's just I'm in Canada. We're in this weird middle ground. We spell things the British way, but then use a bunch of Americanisms. I'm sorry. I don't know what a fortnight is. I don't call A4 paper A4. I call it legal. Because in America, and legal isn't quite A4 because I remember I dug into this. Legal, the closest analog would be A4, but the European page standards are a little different than the North American ones. They're like almost exactly the same, but not quite, which is really irritating. So in America, you have 8.5 by 11, which is called letter, and then like the A4 equivalent, which is 8.5 by 14, I want to say, which is called legal. And then in Europe, it's A4, and I can't remember what the smaller one is. Right, and then of course, like in Australia, you have something called legal pads, which are different. Oh, okay. So Maderick, you're also from Australia. Did not know that. But then A4 is the standard paper size there. So you'll have 8.5 by like 14 or whatever. Anyways, I don't know. All fucking issues of standardization are. I mean, they're just constant. And they feel very silly. We live in a very fragmented world of things, in which people struggle to agree on how to actually make things. So, I feel like when I'm talking about paper sizes instead of game design, I'm probably hitting the limit of what I can do today, and this would put us at 2 hours right about now. So I am going to wrap up, but this was a very like seminal decision, design wise, to include some of the engine kind of tech in designing this. But I think this will pan out. We might change what playing into your virtues and impulses do for you, right? Because in Honesty of Stars, when your actions align with one of your engine's virtues, clear one stress. When your actions align with one of your engine's impulses, or you accept a dark bargain based on its impulses, that action does not deplete your transcendence, and you mark 1 XP. The like second clause of these will change, but this first clause of when your actions align with or you accept a dark bargain based on for impulses, this is gonna stay the same. And then when your actions align with your engine, with your avatar's virtue, clear one stress might be the way to go. We might not change this at all, honestly. This could just be the same. The more I look at it, the more I'm like, maybe that's just that, and that's fine. Also, hilariously, I had to completely rebuild this character sheet. I went to export it as a PDF, and I did so using. I just went like, save as, and be a PDF, right? Be a Photoshop PDF. So what Photoshop then does is really confusing, where there's like a whole flow you go through around like compression and preserving editability and all this kind of shit. And then you save it, and it takes you from being in it replaces, so you see here I'm opening, this is honestyofstars.psd. It changes that to be the PDF, but it doesn't tell you, or it kind of does. It was like super confusing. So then I went to like save thing, and I ended up like accidentally somehow overwriting my original with a flattened PSD, that somehow got generated out of the PDF or something. Um, and so I just had to like completely remake it. And I think I got it bang on. I think everything is like, if I float between these two, yeah, none of the boxes move. Everything is positioned correctly, but God, it's fucking irritating. um, which reminds me that I should take literally all of these files and archive them, make backups. I'm going to do that right now. There, I did it. I just made backup copies of everything that are in a separate folder. All right, friends. Thank you for tuning in to my stream. Oh, I have a thing. Yeah, it's just me now. You will be able to see me tomorrow, Thursday. No, today's Thursday. Tomorrow's Friday. You won't be able to see me either of these days because we're not doing any like Roll20 streams this week, I'm pretty sure. But next week, you can catch me on Roll20 app on Thursday from 11 to 3 Pacific for Burning Wheel. Pretty sure. I won't go too far out of my way talking about schedule because shit's all over the place right now. But generally, I am in various internet places. I have a couple other shows coming down the pipe. Yeah, Ash, is this, can we make the announcement? Can we do this? So some of which is still kind of formulating and percolating, but getting close. So yeah, Sunday of next week. God, can I get the fucking time zone conversion? So it'll be the 23rd, which is my Saturday, but Australia's Sunday. It's like late in the day for me. I'm not sure what the exact time conversion is because I just like, there's a massive blind spot in my mind around how time works. But I will be on Ash's channel, which is twitch.tv/Acegiak, ACEGIAK. And I will, like, I'll tweet before we go live and stuff, so you'll be able to find it via that if you're keeping an eye on my Twitter on my Pacific time Saturday evening. And we are going to be playing a game, possibly of Girl by Moonlight. I can't remember. So you can watch that. I encourage you to do so. Ash has been doing a lot of role-playing stuff. That is quite good. They're just... yeah, Ash is going to run Girl by Moonlight of some description. That crew is just wrapping up an Apocalypse World game that's been really good, and you can check out all the VODs on her YouTube. I've been watching it. It's some excellent role-playing. It goes in some very fun directions, and it's been cool as like a North American person to see Australian take on Apocalypse World. And I got to learn about new things like Fortnights and what Oscorp is. So I encourage you all to check it out and definitely to watch Girl by Moonlight Saturday evenings. And then we're between things on Elf's channel, so I'm not sure what we're going to be playing lately or next time. But so yeah, keep an eye out for me in various internet places. I'm going to be updating the playtest document a little bit more and doing like a version 4.1 because I've got to send out some stuff for On a Sea of Stars. I'm going to do some updates. I'm going to redo layout on Starlit Kingdom and probably change some stuff. I think Darkest Night I'm pretty happy with and probably won't touch, but there are going to be some more changes coming out. And I've got to do a review of all the player character playbooks. So more changes coming very soon for Girl by Moonlight. And I'll be posting on my Twitter about all those. You can follow me at Commuting Crow on Twitter or here twitch.tv/actualfactual or my YouTube, which is I don't remember what the link is. Anyways, I don't think I have a specific link for my YouTube, but I'm Commuting Crow on YouTube, I believe. Bye. I'm just too tired and to shut up.